Hey guys, before we start, just wanted to say that this episode of the You Ask Me podcast is sponsored by Mudwater. Mudwater is an awesome coffee alternative that blends delicious organic ingredients such as adaptogenic mushrooms and turmeric, designed to give you a sustained energy without the jitters. Each serving of Mudwater comes with only 1/7 the amount of caffeine that comes with coffee, so you get a focused energy boost without the crash. And if you're looking to cut back on coffee, Mudwater is a great alternative that is also gluten-free, vegan, and keto friendly. So, if you're ready to upgrade your morning, feel free to use my link and try Mudwater out. You'll get 15% off any new purchase that you buy, and if you decide to subscribe and get a starter kit, you'll get $20 off along with a free frother. So go ahead, try it out, ditch coffee, drink Mudwater. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back, everybody, to the You Ask We podcast, the show where you ask the questions, they answer them, and I'm just the guy in the middle. And this week, we have an amazing guest. He's a Los Angeles-based visual artist. He has a new book called Output of a Perfectionist, which has 250 of his comic style pieces, like all compiled into one book. It's now available. I want to give a warm welcome to Mr. David Finch. David, how's everything?
It's great. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. So, yeah, the way the show works is pretty much we got a bunch of questions that people submitted and want to know about you. But the first question always comes from me, and that's what's new? What's going on?
Um, I'm just trying to keep a schedule, you know. I'm very grateful that things have been working and the work has gotten out there, and now I'm uh, yeah, just in a groove with promoting it and selling it, and yeah, so part of why I'm here, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome. You've been like blowing up lately on like social media. It's like, has that happened for you like overnight, or has that like been an overall like growth like
Yeah, I
coming
think
up?
it comes in waves. I think it kind of initially took off in like beginning of 2022, with TikTok.
Mhm.
Um, and at that point, I'd already had like a lot of my work. So like kind of posting it routinely there, like worked with the algorithm. And I also think the work, the sensibility translated on TikTok, it's just looser and actually funny. So yeah, that got the ball rolling. And then yeah, I feel like there's a direct correlation between like how much you post and how much attention you get. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's it,
100%.
it's an evolving process for sure.
100%. But yeah, like let's go back like, all the way to the beginning. Like what inspired you to make art? And also like a lot of your art like has like punchlines to it. Like have you considered like comedy at all? Like with those punchlines or
Yeah. Comedy is my background. So I always made art. Like I never stopped. But it was always, something, you don't really like see it as viable. Um, so I, studied writing and I worked in film and I performed stand up and improv and sketch comedy. Um, and I would storyboard things that I wrote and produced. So I think like really cutting my teeth in comedy is where that voice comes into the art at this point. Um, so it was always kind of like having two parallel disciplines, and then uh, over about 4 or 5 years ago, those lines crossed, and the work turned into what it is now.
yeah, it's clearly worked out.
Thank
Where
you.
where did you like perform like comedy wise?
I did, yeah, just a lot of improv around LA. So Second City, IO West, a little UCB, but a lot of indie shows. Yeah, and that'll really like uh, build up a tolerance for having nobody see what you're doing, like
Right.
um, so I think at a certain point, actually, no, I know the exact point. It was at the beginning of COVID when that whole scene got wiped out.
Mhm.
Uh, I had this muscle of just like performing daily, And then when that was taken away, I think that uh, routine and discipline applied into my drawings. And I just sort of consciously was like, I'm going to make one of these a day, and was really like focused on coming up with like a concept. I'd had a lot of material too, like jokes, stand-up jokes, things like that, that I realized worked better as, these comic pieces. Um, so yeah, it just that's kind of the precise moment.
Yeah, it checks out. So yeah, I mean, like moving back to the art, I mean, you just like released a new book, Output of the
Mhm.
Perfectionist, like that has like 250 of your works. I mean, what inspired you to like make the book? And also like what do you hope like people get out of it?
Yeah. Well, the book's coming up on just being about a year old now. It'll turn a year old on September 29th. So this is a good time to come on and promote it again. Uh, but this is actually my second book. So the first book was just titled Coffee Table Book. And that was obviously very conceptual, where I wanted to package my first 200 pieces in this style, really as like a product. I was very conscious of like having a thing at a certain price point that offered a lot of my work, trying to elevate all the work by like having them, connected to each other. Um, you know, uh, but then it took 3 years between that first book and the release of my second book to kind of develop more material. But I also think that the material like evolved and became more introspective. And I was going through a lot during that time. And I was actually using art to kind of address a lot of that stuff, which is sort of like, that's the point of art. But it's just weird to like have it happen that way.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so then when I had enough pieces to compile into another book, um, I was a lot more, I think, intentional about how I organized them, which pieces I chose to include, how I sequenced them, and wanted to sort of like reveal the themes as people go through it. Um, yeah, that I was addressing, mental health, a lot of recovery stuff, relationships with others, and with a lot with yourself. I really do think it was like a form of self therapy. And I find that a lot of people who are artists, um, or aspiring artists, which is just still an artist, but you're not totally comfortable saying that you're an artist. But um, yeah, I like that those people relate to the work, because I think that I underwent that same process of trying to find my voice and find a style. And I think this book is really for them. It's a lot of very explicit, self-referential material.
Yeah. And it's like you just like felt like basically like the stuff you were going through was also similar to what a lot of people were going through. So it's like you kind of wanted to compile all that to be relatable for them.
I didn't think that at the time. Again, it was a form of self-therapy, but now that it's out, and
Mhm.
I've had a year of promoting this new book, and really like having conversations, like selling it at the Melrose Trading Post, where I met you, actually seeing people face to face talk about it. Obviously, like online comments are very revealing too, uh, but to actually see people interact with it and be affected by it in real time, um, that's where I like understand the way that it resonates. But at the time, it was only for me. It was only, which is like again a tough muscle to build up, to like look at your own work, because I don't think that you can perceive it, uh, you know, the way that others do. But the one thing I do know is that you need to be uncomfortable sharing it. Like I think that that's the only way that people, um, that like indicates that you're on the right path. If you feel kind of uncomfortable and exposing yourself, then most likely somebody's going to relate to that, because a lot of what people are going through, they don't, it's uncomfortable to talk about or to share. And so that's sort of yeah, just a good signpost for art, I guess.
100%. And I mean, like, why the name Output of a Perfectionist? Like, where'd you get the name from? What was the inspiration behind that?
Well, it was originally a piece,
Okay.
and I remember I made that piece in kind of this push where I really did have like a flow that was similar to the first time I got into this style, where I was making at least a piece a day. And I remember in that window, that like 30-day period of time where I was making a lot of work, there was a moment where I was really like focused on minimalism, and I was really trying to like, with the fewest possible strokes or whatever, like make a piece. And it was something about reverse engineering a blank page, and that piece sort of came out of that moment. And I didn't really think about it, because that's the thing, is like I can't analyze my own work or know what is going to be uh, successful or resonate with a lot of, with people. Um, but I did feel like in assembling the book, like I wanted the cover to be a piece in and of itself, to like have the cover get people's attention and affect them and all that. Um, and I felt like that piece sort of, with all these kind of different thematic elements to the book, like sort of like spoke for a lot of the work. Like it really, you know, yeah, it just like encouraged the spirit of making work because you need to, not just because it has to be like amazing or getting, putting the uh, cart before the horse or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%. And moving on to kind of like the actual scene that you're in right now, like the Los Angeles scene, like has LA shaped your approach like within your art at all? Or are you from LA also?
I'm from Iowa originally.
So it's
uh,
like has the LA culture like shifted like anything in your brain in regards to like approach to the art?
I think so, like 100%. Um, yeah, I've tried to erase as much of the Iowa DNA from me as possible, but I don't think it ever really, you can't do that.
Mhm.
But I've lived out here for 14 years, so longer than anywhere else. And I do feel like I've lived a lot of different lives here, which I think LA, you can do that. You can move a mile away and your whole field of vision changes. And um, but yeah, I think again the film sensibility, the kind of grinding it out. Uh, People move here with no kind of idea of how to do things or even what they're doing. And that sort of like constant rejection, like you got to sort of, work through that. And I do think a lot of that feeling was you know, captured in the work. And especially kind of the entertainment stuff. I do have like a decent percentage of work that references film, the filmmaking process,
Mhm.
comedy itself, uh, and the writing process. Even the perfectionist piece could kind of like resonates with writers or really anybody, like any type of artist. Um, so yeah, I do feel kind of inexorably linked to Los Angeles, which I like. Um, yeah.
And it's like compared to Iowa, would you say like Los Angeles is 10 times better or
Better, better is a strong word.
yeah.
Uh, I do think that there is a market for people who support art, which is very rare. So I think if you're going to make a living being an artist, LA is one of the few places in America that you can do that. Um, so in that sense, yes, it is better than Iowa. But uh,
Business.
what?
Good for business.
Yeah, exactly. Good for business.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, like kind of diving deeper into the art itself. Like a lot of your pieces kind of suggest like a paradox between perfectionism and vulnerability. So how do you like kind of try to navigate through those like two like separate elements in your like process?
Perfectionism and vulnerability. Um, I mean, it's sort of related to what I was talking about with like that feeling of you needing to expose yourself.
Hmm.
Uh, and again, like that doesn't just mean, well, I mean, you can do anything you want, like, um, but you know, pieces have to be both, you know, vague and specific. It has to be evocative, where you're not just, or I don't know. I don't really know. There's really no like definition. It's just kind of like what I've found works for me, where I deem something as being like complete. I have to kind of live with a feeling for a certain amount of time before I can process it and translate it into work. And I know that being vulnerable is like um, a good sign. And
Hmm.
then as far as the perfectionist side of it, I think I deliberately, like, again, going back to the minimalism thing, try to make it look very not complex. Like try to finish it quickly. I work with paper, mixed media, but not overworking things. Just like the second it feels like fully realized, like being done with it. But it is sort of this like being in step with the concept and the drawing process itself. I really don't know if that answered the question. I just sort of riffed there, but like,
It answered
yeah,
it good enough.
those are you're right. Like the vulnerability and the perfectionism are definitely at play all the time.
Mm.
Um, but you can't let that idea of what it looks like in your head stop you from doing it, I guess, is the kind of
Yeah,
important thing.
100%. And like, I mean, like through all of the subjects that you kind of like talked about through your art, like, would you say there was like one subject or like a few subjects that were like specifically personal or challenging to like put on a canvas?
Mm. Yeah, I think anything like related to relationships or like your childhood, um, those are always sort of like hard for me because it's like hard stuff for me to talk about.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, just always. So like that's also where I know that it's like worthwhile. Definitely the kind of addiction stuff that I like, went throughout the period of the book too. Um, like if you go through the book, you can actually see me uh sort of like leaning into addiction, embracing it as a form of self-therapy. Um, and then sort of this kind of like conscious choice, that it's run its course and getting sober. Like the work, that type of work, I did sequence chronologically. So there is, and yeah, like I know that that is uncomfortable, or like, yeah. But again, it's things that it's not just me that it has dealt with this, like, so the fact that I was able to use art kind of in real time, to address those things. Again, the big thing is like just using words and being very explicit about the circumstances that I'm in. Um, that is what really like opened me up to these very like specific, issues where like I spent a lot of years just making, abstract paintings or things that, yeah, again, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I
Yeah, it's
just got.
all good. It's all good. I don't want to push. I'm sorry. But I mean,
No,
if
no,
it
no, no. I'm riffing on the question. Like, yeah, but I definitely like, uh yeah, there are certain things that were uncomfortable, but I certainly like don't want to shy away from that. Like if you know that there's something that is is not right, like you need to address it, you know.
Mhm. And I mean, I'm certain like your own experiences through your art has helped like many people. So you should be proud.
That Thank you. Yeah, that is always really nice to hear. That's really the most important thing to me to see, is when somebody says something like that, which yeah, I again, you're kind of behind the veil of the internet, so it
Mhm.
those comments might get lost, but like those are the always the ones that like, you know, live in my mind forever.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the internet, like, and in regards to like social media, like most artists tend to kind of show like a perfect polished product, but your style is kind of more simplistic and raw, like in comparison to that. So it's like, I mean, I know you kind of touched on it a little bit before, but like, how important is it to you to like keep that like flawed style? Like, and what message do you like hope to send to other artists or your consumers through that?
Yeah, I love thank you for that question. Like it's a very I appreciate that observation. But like well, I shouldn't start numbering this because I'm going to just rant, so I'll lose track of the numbers. But first, I like that is my style. Like that is my drawing style.
Right.
So I've always known that, and the fact that I have this with this format or whatever, like it gives me the freedom to like explore my own drawing style through all these different like compositions or scenes or whatever. Like that was very liberating. And I like so like the idea of the piece dictates how much like time I spend on it or how intricate the scene needs to be or how reduced the thing needs to be. But definitely what you're saying is like I'm very like very consciously put in this idea of like inviting other people, like seeing a style that is so loose, uh sort of like allowing permission to people with their own styles to like not let it hold them back. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like literally like I could do that. Like that's not that you know, unattainable or anything. Um yeah. So and I always love when people like comment on the drawing style itself because again, that's sort of where I'm coming from. And the writing is this thing that I just kind of fused with it at a certain point.
Mhm.
Um, but I like when people just relate to the drawing itself.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and also like, I feel like at the end of the day, like art is really all about like the meaning behind the piece. Like, it's not necessarily like, oh, if the piece looks good, like a piece can look good, but it's not like it could still like not be considered art because there's no like real meaning behind it. And it's like
Mm,
you kind of go the opposite route where it's like it's not the prettiest picture in the world, but there's like a lot of meaning behind like each piece.
hmm
So, I mean, like based on that, like would you be able to like share a story about like like a story like behind one of your more meaningful pieces or favorite pieces that you've made?
Oh. Um, yeah, I mean, I always liked when art wasn't conventionally beautiful, you know?
Mhm.
Like, I feel like we kind of moved past that concept a long time ago that something just needs to be aesthetically beautiful for it to be worthwhile.
Mhm.
Um, but again, that's where we go back to like the specificity of all my work. Like, if something very, you know, uh, very specific like connects with somebody who's like going through that exact thing, like it'll feel like a revelation, you know. um so that's yeah. uh I don't know, man. I mean, the one that comes to mind is like the Amy Winehouse piece I did, and I did that right before I decided to go to rehab.
Hmm.
And so like I just had this kind of in my mind, that song just like playing in my head, tried to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no. And because I had decided to go to rehab, I was like, they tried to make me go to rehab, and I said okay, and now I'm feeling much better. Like just sort of the inverse, the flip side of, you know, if she had made that decision. But then it wouldn't have been a great song. It would have been so like that. There's an example of like where the concept was in my head, and I knew that I wanted to make that a painting, right? Like, because sometimes I do a lot of this work on paper because it's cheaper. Um, but then sometimes like a bigger concept like that will hit me, and I'll be like, the scale needs to be a part of it. um, so I knew I wanted to do a painting, and I approached the painting with that same kind of immediacy of a drawing of paper, and did it in like about an hour. And she, like, the second that I laid out her image, like with the hair, and just the like just enough of the drawing of the painting to like recognize that it was Amy.
Hmm.
I finished it. I could have belabored it and done something very like photorealistic, but I did feel like once I put those words with her
Like similar
skeletal
features,
image. What?
like similar features, like.
Yeah, yeah, just enough.
Mhm.
Like that's where I felt like it was done, because like, she also was incomplete, right? Like she didn't, yeah, at that moment. Yeah, anyway, so there's just an example of what you're describing, and then I was really proud of that piece, but also because it was very personal. And yeah, but again, like, not the first guy to go to rehab, won't be the last. So
Mhm.
people like yeah, it's for other people too.
100%. And I mean, like you kind of touched on this like a bunch through the episode already. But I mean, obviously mental health has like definitely influenced like a lot of your work. Um, what role like would you believe art plays in the mental health like advocacy world?
um I'm very happy to be talking about it now, because I didn't ever think that I had any mental health concerns. Which is yeah, like, if you think that way, just heads up. Uh, um so yeah, I'm very happy to be speaking in this context now, kind of having moved through it, and having, again, art like it's a fixed point on something that's completely unfixed. Like, uh so we get to like look at these things and have these things that we can use to discuss these issues. And I'm very, yeah, you're making me aware that I'm very proud of the fact that my work can do that. Um, but yeah, so I don't really know how, other than like it is a reference point. It is a thing that everybody, and that is the point of art, is that it facilitates discussions between people. Um, and I'm glad that my work is very, again, specific to all these situations or topics that need to be discussed.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, like on top of that, like your work has definitely inspired people like all over. But how would you hope your work inspires people, like specifically, like artistically and personally, like how what do you hope like that
I
people
hope that, and I think I have seen it. Um, you know, I think I'm 10 years ahead of a lot of people who relate to my work. Again, there's not like a no like, but just using TikTok as an example.
Mhm.
And I hope that like it does provide a pathway or a source of inspiration for people to pursue their own artistic discipline and voice. And I like that the words and incorporating the writing uh helps people too. So I guess I would say like spend as much time writing as you do drawing, like both things, both are means of communicating. And the more you do it, the more you'll understand your own voice and your own perspective. And then no matter where that takes you, it's a good thing to have. It's a very yeah, yeah, necessary because you'll understand yourself, you'll understand your relationship to others, who you should be spending time with, who you shouldn't. I don't know. It's very important.
100%, 100% agree. Yeah, I mean, overall, at the end of all this, like, what's next for you? Like after this brand new book coming out, like, what do you have going on like next? Any
Um,
future?
I'm in talking with the art department on Sunset to do a gallery show. Uh, that's very encouraging. I again, doing Melrose has been great in like presenting the work,
Mhm.
framing it, seeing it on a wall. That's really the important thing. And a little side note to like artists, like always put your piece on a wall. It changes your relationship with it.
Mhm.
It affects the way that you make work. So definitely give yourself that like you know um opportunity to see that. So I definitely am focused on getting more in the gallery world and because I do think that like online, again, this conversation is very helpful and I appreciate it to like discuss the work, but I do think online sometimes it might be lost as memes, like it might not even be perceived as fine art, which is where I'm coming from. So I definitely want to try to get into those more traditional channels. Um, and yeah, but just continuing to promote it, continuing to make work. I do feel like I've kind of had enough distance from a lot of that experience that um, made me make the last book, and now I'm making new work again. So somewhere down the line, doing another book, but definitely just getting more connected to the professional world outside of me just doing it myself. But until that happens, I will keep doing it myself. I have gotten used to it,
Mhm.
and I'm grateful to everybody who has allowed me to do that, because it wouldn't be happening if the work didn't connect with people.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I'm looking forward to everything you got coming up. Like I'm a really big fan of your work. Like I'm really excited to see what you have coming up next.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, the way the show works also is, as I mentioned before, the first question always comes from me, and the last question also always comes from me. And that's if you had to give one piece of advice to the people watching at home, well, what would you tell them?
Um, I don't know. That feels like a big question. I sort of
Be,
related to
be as cliche as you want. It's totally cool.
cliche as I want.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, like I think I'll just reiterate that if you are an artist, like keep making your work, and if you keep making it, it will evolve. Like I promise, it'll like I underwent that, um, moved through just about every conceivable style until I got here. So just don't stop. And yeah,
Keep on pushing, everybody. David, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. If you guys like this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you guys want to see what's coming up next with the show, who's coming on next, feel free to follow all the socials. Like all the announcements are going to be there. My links are going to be down below. If you guys want to see what's going on with David, what he has coming up, if you want to see his book, things like that, his links are going to be down below as well. And with that, this has been the US We Podcast. My name is Evan Toronto, and I'll see you guys next week.
yup.
Up.